Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. My name is Justin, and joining me on each episode will be my close friends and colleagues, Jeff Moore and Mace Warren. On the podcast, we're mostly going to be discussing the work that we do within the field of forensic therapy, what that process looks like, maybe some of the unconventional or newer approaches that we may use as we're helping clients work through the treatment process and work through the justice system. So this would be a great podcast if you're maybe a client looking to get enrolled with a provider. You're not sure what to expect. You're not sure what that process is going to look like. This will give you a lot of information, at least for our style, what that will actually look like on your end. Also, would be a great source of information. Maybe you're going into the field of social work or psychology and you're wanting to do counseling and you think you may or you might be interested in working with this population. This will give you a great idea on what to expect, some of the different approaches that you can actually use. So with that being said, as we get this up and rolling, get all the social media websites started out, look us up on there like Facebook and Twitter. And feel free to ask questions, if you have any kind of feedback or comments, things that you want to add or things that you specifically want to know about from our end. We'd love to hear from you. So that's the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, and that's Guerrilla, Guerrilla. So look us up on there. Be patient with us as we get this up and rolling, work out some of the kinks, and learn the ins and outs of getting a podcast started. Also, the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast is brought to you by Alpha Counseling and Treatment, which provides relationship-centered therapy to give you emotional strength for a better living. Now, if you want more information, you can actually check out the very modest website at utahsbesttherapy.com if you want some more information. So yeah, today's episode is just going to be really getting into the initial stages of just explaining more about who we are, what we do, why we got into this field, and just some of the work that we do in the forensic therapy. So hope you enjoy the first episode, and thank you for tuning in.
Start.
We're started.
Well, hey. Well, we can start whenever.
So now we're going to talk about the whole thing.
Yeah.
This is the
okay. So just make sure. So just make sure you keep usual same distance from this. Yeah.
The entire time.
Just you want to stay you just don't want to all of a sudden get close and then back up and.
Why would I all of a sudden get close?
Someone does that. It's not me.
So we'll just start out with this is the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, and this is Mace, Jeff, and Justin.
Which one's which,
talking
though?
We don't guys.
Know.
Yeah.
Should we do intros?
Sure. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. What about the intros, though?
You could say
I'm not going to read, you're not going to say your profile, right? That's online. No, that's lame, dude.
Yeah.
We should just say that because obviously we need to get, because I'm setting up all the stupid social media shit, like the Instagram, the Facebook page, and all that. We should just kind of briefly say who we are. And if you want to know more about us, here's our website, go look it up. Kind of telling people to go look, and then we can add just more on there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So I guess we could start out by saying that we all work for Alpha Counseling. My name is Jeff Moore. And
where'd you go to school, dude?
I went to school. University of Utah is where I got my degree.
No, where'd you go to elementary school? Start there.
That's what you want to know. The readers are the
and it was actually the best school.
Did you go to Polk?
I was Grandview. I was a Grizzly.
Oh, what a loser, dude.
Anything I would have said other than Polk, you would have told me I was a loser.
I know. Well, Polk School is the best school, right?
The one we love the most.
Yeah. I'm telling you.
I'll go back to Polk.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Wait, no.
I'm done introducing myself.
No, you're not.
They'll get to know me.
So what about, you went to where? The U?
I went to the U.
Okay. What'd you get on your LCSW exam?
You know what? Next topic.
All right, this is going to be a recurring theme of this podcast is LCSW scores. Mace beat me by 4 points. Let's get that out in the open. Mace Warren beat Jeff Moore by 4 points on the LCSW exam.
And you can access that on Doppel if you'd like. It's really easy. So I'm Mace Warren, and I went to Brigham Young University. That's where I graduated from. Although I'm not LDS, so
you fit right in there, didn't you?
They loved me. When I talked to the university chaplain the first day, he was like, "Do you follow the honor code?" Totally. every day of my life, bro. Although they were really pleasant down there. They were fun to talk to. I like my Mormon buddies, so it was a good time. But yeah, and I graduated in 2010, but been doing clinical therapy since 2008 with the sex offender population.
Which is what we're here to talk about.
Right, and I work for Alpha Counseling as well. And then there's also, of course, Justin.
Oh, hi. I went to Weber State for my undergrad and then did my master's online, actually, with Our Lady of the Lake University, which
Land of Lakes Butter.
Land of Our Lady of the Peace University. They were really cool. I actually liked it, even though it was an online deal. Realistically, the real-life training, all that work came from getting in the field, working with Alpha, so got me a good footprint where to head with things. But actually getting in the field was a much different story. But yeah, so I worked for Alpha 2.
Sweet.
Pretty much work with, 95% of my caseload is sex offenders.
What's the other 5%?
So that's some private clients that I see, so people that are making their own decision, non-court ordered, to come in and work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah. I just deal with a bunch of, all of my guys are from the halfway house, high-profile dudes. Try to keep it that way. So those are the fun ones to work with.
And the crazy thing, I guess people should know, I don't know what's crazy, but we've been friends probably since we were 15 or 16 years old, or at least known of one another. We all went to the same high school. Somehow, all ended up working at the same company. So, I mean, this podcast is kind of a natural reflection of that.
Dude, that like scares clients when you talk about that too, because I'll be talking about it and I'll say something like in a group therapy session, like making fun of Ed. Yeah. You know, I remember mentioning one time. So Edward Cook's our polygrapher, and I remember mentioning that when he was eating cereal, he used to eat cereal like because when we lived in an apartment with a bunch of other losers, right, that didn't ever wash anything, of course, and like everybody would try to keep their own dishes because the sink was just full of dirty dishes perpetually, right? Because it's just bachelors. Nobody cleaned anything. So then it came to the point where we kept our own dishes that we'd hide in our rooms, you know. and then you use them and then wash them right after, and then there's always that mysterious pot with God knows what growing on it, but nobody would wash it. So then it got to the point where like the guys we were living with broke into our rooms and stole our clean dishes to use them. So Ed would...
It's more work than washing the dishes.
I know.
Someone.
Which was part of the joke. And then Ed started eating cereal. He would put it in his mouth and then drink milk and then swish it around. You know, but like the funny thing was he'd do like a head shake like this every time. I'm like, dude, you don't need to do that. Like if you just put it in your mouth, that's enough, bro.
Mace is vigorously shaking his head, demonstrating what Ed did. I guess.
So then I told the group this, and then they'd be talking to them. They'd be talking to Ed about this, and they didn't know I was talking about Ed. So they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Mace was mentioning this," you know, in small talk. And Ed's like, "That's me," and they're talking crap, and they come back. I didn't know you knew Ed from all that, and they're freaked out about it. They're like,
they're all in on it.
How do you guys know each other this long? And so, you know, obviously they get worried because you never turn on Ed. You know, I was like, well, yeah, you're right, but that's
so don't lie.
Yeah, that's true. So should we talk about like the development, what direction we're trying to head with this thing?
Sure, yeah. Guess if people are wanting to tune in, they should know why.
So we started talking about this a month ago at least. Yeah. And I guess a big piece of it is so we have the type of therapy we do is called forensic therapy anyway, which sounds really fancy. We tried to get the narrator from Forensic Files to come do this, but he's long croaked. So
did he die?
Yeah, I think so. He has a voice of an angel though, bro.
Does.
Dude, every single episode is on Netflix now. Every single episode. Dude, every night. Every night I go to sleep to that guy. I'm talking about murder, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's...
Well, I'm glad that they put it on Netflix, because like on my DVR, Ani always gets mad, because it'll be 99% full, and I'll go in and it says Forensic Files, 291 episodes. I need those, though.
Well, dude, you just turn it to HLN. HLN's a Forensic Files channel. Yeah, but no more commercials, so that's kind of cool. But
Forensic therapy, though.
So yeah, forensic therapy. So it's just a fancy way of saying where mental health therapy or any type of psychotherapy crosses boundaries with legally involved or justice involved clients. So I also do that with a lot of substance abuse clients with another job that I have. But specifically, this is with, we specialize in sex offender-specific treatment, which is a very particular kind and unique kind of treatment. And that's going to be a big focus of the podcast, is just going to be talking about sex offender treatment and all the nuances therein. So as a listener, I guess the importance of that, there's three primary avenues. So first of all is if you have been charged with a sexual offense and you have the luxury of having access to the internet or being able to download podcasts, we think this would be beneficial to you because some of the topics that we're going to talk about is going to be based on a lot of the concepts that we teach in our program. We should hopefully share our own personal philosophies on each one of these things, and then say why it's important for you as a client to know these things, right? Why this would help you. I mean, ultimately, our goal for clients is to help them no longer be involved in the criminal justice system, right?
We wanted the clients to know our perspective on why our philosophy is important to us.
Well, right. As a client, I think that I don't know. So,
dude, can you imagine getting convicted of a charge for something that was probably like the most shameful spot in your life, and now you've got to go tell some idiot you've never met before everything you've ever done sexually, yeah, okay, I get what you're. We should probably, So maybe as a client listening to this, you can get an idea of maybe who we are, at least the three of us, who we are and where we're coming from, our backdrop on it, and I can at least say that I believe that my philosophy and Mace and Justin's philosophy pretty well bleeds through to the other people in our company at least. And so whether you find comfort in that or it terrorizes you, at least listen up to what we're saying.
Yeah. Well, I think the other piece too is I think it, and I get the question, I don't know about you guys, but I get the question continually, like, how do you work with these people, right?
All the time.
Well, and here's the thing. This is my take on it. I kind of have thought that growing up because my first job was working with juvenile sex offenders, and so I've noticed it's a huge dichotomy. There's no like run of the mill therapist when it comes to sex offenders. You're either
Those are my children. Sorry about that.
No, I'll just edit this out.
Okay.
That's all right.
so pause.
Should we just wait till it calms down?
Oh yeah, she's here, huh?
Well,
Yeah.
let's see.
All right, I think
You're up.
make sure we're still getting our
Check.
load on. Yeah.
So when because a lot of people ask me like, okay, how can you work with these people, right? Don't you guys get that a lot?
All the time.
So like when I was, because this is where I started working with juvenile sex offenders originally, and one thing I noticed was there's no like middle ground as far as the therapists go. Like you're either really good as a sex offender therapist or you suck big time. It's almost like the island of misfit therapists.
It seems to be.
Like if you have nowhere else to go, then you're going to come and work with sex offenders because you have no other option, right?
So you've like basically bombed out of other avenues that a social worker can work in and end up stuck as a sex offender therapist.
So you might not have a choice. You might say, well, I'm working with, and I think you see that reflect in a lot of how the therapists treat the clients. But so for me, what I tell people is I say like, okay, well, look, here's the deal. One way or another, the whole lock them up and throw away the key thing it's not ever going to happen. No. They're coming back into your community one way or another, and you want your community safe, and they need to talk to somebody who's going to help them become safe because I believe that they can, right?
And at that point, there's mentioning again that lock them up and throw away the key approach is not a viable option. They will be out in the community. They need treatment.
Well, right, yeah. So I think so when we talk about this, I talk about it with, I think the phrase I use is, and I don't think it's my original one. I don't know where I heard it, but dispassionate compassion, right? So I'm going to have compassion for these guys. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I dig their offenses. I mean, their offenses are horrific. Right. Some of the most abhorrent things I've ever heard somebody do. I think we all are kind of numb to hearing some of these stories, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing, but.
What did you call it? Dispassionate compassion?
Dispassionate compassion, right. That I don't know if that's a Mace original, though. I think I've heard that somewhere, so.
Well, explain it, because I like it. I think I know what you're saying.
Well, basically, I got to do that with any forensic therapy, right? If I'm doing therapy with a person who could be locked up next week, or whatever, or like substance abuse too. I mean, you can't take it personally that somebody has substance abuse issues, but you can't also be so passionate about the offense that it clouds your judgment of being a compassionate therapist towards your client. So I can't be so judgmental about the some of the things that these guys have done and start to feel superior to them and not be able to help them, because if I'm just an authority figure, so this is sometimes you see this in therapy sessions where a client comes in. So it's like the semantics trap, right, in group therapy. So a client will come in and they say, "My victim," and then
that's not your victim. She is not your possession.
Right. The therapist bags on them, and then the group does too, right? Well. So then I tell them. So the correct terminology is the person I victimized, right? Well, what do you think that client's going to say the next? I mean, their life's hanging on the line after all. What do you think they're going to say the next time they come in?
They're going to be a parrot and repeat it
right
back to you. Oh, the person whom I victimized.
Yeah, so that's coercive is what that is on my end as a therapist. And last time I checked, therapists aren't supposed to be coercive. I mean, we can be didactic and teach, but we're not trying to be coercive. And so I think you have to be patient with some of those things. Some of these clients say awful things about these people that they really hurt. And you can't get like wrapped up in that, right? You can't be like wrapped up in that to the degree that you're like, so you get mad, you can't. So that's why you have to be dispassionate and be compassionate towards the idea that, okay, well, I'm grateful that guy was I don't want to say brave, but I can't think of another word, that he was able to bring that out in a group and say that in a way that he was vulnerable enough to say it in that way. Yeah, he's being a jerk, but I need to recognize where that tells me, that's a lot of information, tells me where he is in therapy, right? And then I can move forward from there. So anyway, I think that, this is good for clients to hear where we come from there, and you'll find out that there's just no, more understanding, empathic therapists for this population. And I'm not trying to toot our own horn here, but I do think I can't think of better therapists working with this population. I really can't. So, there's at least with our company, there's within our company. I'm not saying I'm the best therapist that's working with these guys. I know plenty of
just kind of the idea that we have, the theory that we have, and everything that we subscribe to.
Sure.
I think that, again, like cheesy terms I try to get away from, but there's certainly a culture to our company and the way that we maybe encourage our therapists to relate to the clients. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sure exactly what versions of listeners we have or who's specifically tuning in, but there's probably people that want us to berate the client, to tell them what for, to put them down, to let them know, let them know the impact of what they did. And then there's other people that are wanting us to go the route of rescuing them. And I don't know, the dispassionate compassion thing kind of made sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's hard with the stigma, the stereotype that sex offenders have is usually you would say, well, that person doesn't deserve someone that's going to listen to them because they hurt somebody else, which I agree. And I think a lot of times when we talk about it, people can think, well, what about the victim? And it's like, I agree. What about the victim? But I'm not saying because you care about the sex offender, you don't care about the victim.
Exactly.
You can care about both, and they both will go in their own separate ways and get their own treatment, which they both should. But if the idea of treatment is to go in and shame someone and beat them up, like you were saying earlier, Mace, just say what you need to say. In a sense, we're kind of teaching these guys what society's been telling them all along. You're not allowed to talk about how you're feeling. You're not allowed to say what's going on, which is probably a big part of the reason they got in this position. So if treatment, quote unquote treatment, is not letting them do that, what are they really learning?
Well, yeah, and they
spot on. Dude.
Well, so even the focus on the victim sometimes they're. So I go to a lot. There's conferences we go to all the time, training and stuff, and at the beginning there's a keynote speaker usually, and they say, our overall goal, our overall treatment goal all the time should be no more victims, right? Which I've always taken an issue with because, okay, so who's my client? Is my client the dude sitting in front of me? And again,
yes.
yeah, right. Or is it some mysterious victim? Who are we talking about? So never, you would never do that with a client who came in with depression. You wouldn't,
I was just going to say that.
Right. You wouldn't externalize the treatment goal into some mythical character. So we're saying no more victims. So we're anticipating the future likelihood of victimization. So I could take an issue with that. I say, look, no. Our objective is to help these guys lead pro-social and rewarding lives. Now the byproduct of that is anybody who's engaged in their life and enjoying their life and committed to their life isn't going to be committing crimes, and they're not going to create no more victims. So a byproduct, a side effect of me making this guy successful and integrating in the community is he's not creating any more victims. The end. Nope. So there it is. I mean, you both win at that point. And again, it's just a misunderstanding of, look, that dude's coming to your neighborhood. He's coming. Like, you can't stop it. They're coming there. You can't stop it from happening. Who do you want talking to that guy before he sits down and makes camp in your neighborhood, right? I get it. And you can argue all day that you hate him. Great. I'm not saying like him. I'm saying understand that there's a reality to the situation, and you want the dude to be safe in your community. We know how to do it.
If he's healthy and healthy-minded and feels good about himself, and that's key. If he feels good about himself, he's safer.
Yeah.
He's going to be a better neighbor, a better community member. And again, if he's feeling high on himself and doing well, he's substantially less likely to reoffend. Kind of back on the idea of depression, us worrying about the victim. I mean, can you imagine a depressed client coming in and us being like, think of all the people you're bumming out.
Yeah.
Like, everybody, you know what I mean? We wouldn't do that as therapists.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
stupid.
True, though.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the problem with sex in general, especially in our society. That's so taboo. Like, that's just so off topic. You don't even want to even remotely address that. So think of the fact that someone does something sexually deviant, against a child, against somebody unwilling, anything like that. So we don't even want to necessarily even remotely consider the idea of, what happened to that person? Why did they do it? It's just, like you were saying, throw them up, lock away the key. Okay, that's great for the next 10 minutes.
Right.
But when they come back out, what do you want? Do you want somebody that's pissed off and bitter and can't find work because he's constantly judged, he can't find a place to live? So now he's mad, now he's resentful, and he doesn't have outlets. What do we think is going to happen there?
Well, right, and I've seen so many clients, and I know the parallels are kind of the same, but they're not parallels are similar. They're not the same, but I've talked to a bunch of clients that's been in the prison program at the not sex offender, but the substance abuse program. They've been sober for 8 years and gone through whatever level of programming, and the day they get out, they relapse, and I'm like, well, what happened? And it was kind of. They were just putting the finger to the system because they were resenting the treatment that they got because they got treated like crap, and they were coerced into saying things and doing things in therapy that weren't to their betterment. And so and I've seen clients do this too when they come to our program. They've been to other programs. They're like kind of taken back by like, wait a minute. They almost feel like it's a trap.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it's not like. And don't get me wrong. I mean, anybody who's listening to this, we don't let them get away with anything. Like, it's nothing like danger. I'm saying the approach, and here's the thing. This is so back to my point about the differing therapists. I mean, if you can't have that dispassionate compassion for these guys, I would just say don't work in this field. It's not an admission that you're an awful therapist. I say some people, Jeff said this a lot of times, he just said, really simple statement. He just says, some people ought to not work with felons. And I totally believe that. Like, if you try to out antisocial a felon, I mean, give me a break, bro.
You're gonna get beat.
Like you're not that good at it. They are experts at it. So, I mean, again, you have to be able to roll with it. And
well, there's plenty of areas I know I just wouldn't want to work that I don't think I would do well in or just doesn't appeal to me. So I'm not going to purposely pick that if I know I'm going to have like a preconceived, bias or notion. Because going back to what you were kind of saying when you first got into it, I think that's a big part of the problem for society in general, and then especially people getting into the field, is the perception of what a sex offender is, or quote unquote how high risk to reoffend they are, which we obviously know if you look at research is not nearly the case that the media makes it out to be.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think when I was doing my undergraduate at Weber, I remember you came into one of my classes and you were presenting on that. And I knew a little bit from you guys talking about it, but I remember being pretty surprised at some of the stuff you were talking about, like really what these guys go through, day to day, trying to find work, trying to find, a place to live, and more so just talking to them is just like talking to another person struggling with something. They unfortunately just pick something really bad as an outlet for them.
Right.
And I think it really hit me when I first started doing some of my first sessions with you guys when I came on for my internship, is like, if you can approach it with an open mind and approach it with a client-first mentality, which we should be doing in social work, you don't see anybody sitting across from you, just another person that's just been hurt and doesn't know how to deal with it and just wants to move on and
Well,
wants to work on it.
Face it though. I mean, like, it's easier not to imagine this as like a 24-year-old kid who made a bad mistake, right? Now, again, I understand that's not the entirety of our clients, right, by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, I guess the point there is you will immediately think differently about sex offenders the moment that you have somebody who's close to you who has been charged with and convicted of that, because it's honestly, well, not, I mean, for the most part, at least in my experience, a fraction of their life. It hasn't been something that has dominated their life. Now, sure, there's ones who've been, continual perpetrators for a long period of time. Yeah, they're dangerous, and we work with them. But for a lot of guys, this was not an avenue they could ever see themselves going down. But people don't like to think that. Like, it's easier to think it's Freddy Krueger.
You want that archetypal image
Yeah.
of this boogeyman.
Yeah, it's easier to think that, because then I don't have to identify this as this is a human being. This is somebody who needs, again, and this goes back to what we were talking about. This is a human being who needs everything else that anybody else needs to survive in our community and to thrive in our community. And unless he's thriving, well, again, what happens? He's just going to go back to the same old crap. So again, the template for success should be primed for these dudes. And I think our role is critical, because I would worry if I was a citizen. I'd say, well, wait a minute. So you're saying, maybe you say, okay, well, that makes sense. These guys are coming out. Let's make them successful. But who's the gatekeeper, right? Who says, oh, yeah, you're ready to go out? And that's why I think our jobs are critical, because we're the ones who say, yep, he's ready to go, and he has to be safe for the community. And that sucks. That's a really high risk. That's a position I think we take really seriously. And that's why, I mean, I really enjoy the work that we do, because it is so serious. And it does have a lot of stakes. There's a lot riding on the decisions that we make for these dudes.
That's a piece that I want to make sure people understand that we don't take lightly. Because if you haven't caught on already, we have maybe a different view of sex offenders than the average Joe or even the average treatment provider. And some people might fashion us hug-a-thugs or something. They think that we've got this mentality to where we're ultra light on them and let them kind of get away with everything, and that's certainly not the case. And we don't necessarily have to unpackage this right now today as far as all the different things that we do to make sure that they're being accountable. But I mean, like, certainly we're wanting to hold a firm line with them, making sure that they don't cross certain boundaries. And I mean, if we deem them too unsafe to be in society, we definitely take measures to make sure that they are not in society. It's just that the archetypal image of the boogeyman or the Freddy Krueger, like Mace is talking about, is it's predominantly inaccurate. Like how many times have YouTube been asked, like, by like people in your personal life outside of your professional experience, how many times have you been asked, like, well, what are they like? It's like you, bro. Like all of us, like they fit right in. They're anybody and everybody. And
well, that's kind of the hard part too. Is I think I wasn't. I would say on some level I was kind of that person too, as far as like wondering, well, what are they high risk? Are they ultra? They're going to go out and reoffend just 24/7. Yeah, which we know is not true. But I think a part of it, which I would say I'm a big. I'm not advocate, but I'm a big believer in that the media causes us a lot of problems, especially mainstream media. So I think they'll take a story that they know is going to get attention, that people will click on, people will listen to, and they're going to hype it up. And unfortunately, as citizens, we see that. So if you have a sex offender go out and do something bad, that's going to be all over the news, because unfortunately we click on that, we read that. So it reinforces, oh yeah, see, they all are bad. But you're not going to read the news story in the Standard Examiner on KSL. It's like sex offender completes treatment and gets successful job. You're not going to read that, which that happens way more often than somebody getting. Yeah.
Well, and you're right though, and this is the thing is some dudes are super scary, right? Some dudes, and
for sure,
and deserve and like, well, no, so like for their betterment too. And again, this is kind of a weird concept even for a client. And again, this is kind of why a client would want to listen. I would never, one of the things we kind of take it into account, I never recommend clients to go to prison. What I do recommend is that clients go to a higher level of care. Again, because if a client is in the community seeing me, and he's at a really high risk for reoffending. Well, what good does that do for me to say, yeah, stay in the community, bro? Like, I know that makes me the nice guy because prison is awful as far as I'm concerned, right?
Well, it doesn't help him
right.
either. Yeah.
But if he reoffends, let's say he reoffends, right? And he gets a new charge, well, that dude's going away for life. So how does that do him any good? So again, can he go into a controlled environment where he can get some of these things under control? And I think the answer is yes. But I mean, dude, some guys, it's like, is he going to touch me in session? Remember that one client that we worked with, though, that he was like, as he was getting his PPG done, he looked up child porn. Like,
oh yeah, there are those people out there. This happened. Yeah, this happened.
Like the client got referred for a penile plethysmograph, which we'll talk in a later podcast about what that's about. But it's a specialized type of testing to measure deviant arousal. But anyway, while he was there, I mean, just so ironic that while he was there, he looked up child pornography on the therapist's computer. Like, just ninja, dude. Like, how
high risk is that? Like, you're taking a test to measure your sexual deviance that could have like implications for your future, and you're actively looking up an illegal type of.
You can't show restraint for an hour in your court-ordered therapy session. Dude, what are you doing when you go home?
No kidding.
Yeah. This is the same client in a residential program. Now he was a person of size, we'll say that, and he
280.
He squoze himself through this window that was like, I bet he could get his head through that window.
It was like a pet door.
He got in the middle of the night while he was supposed to be going to the bathroom, and then broke into a therapist's office and somehow got on the computer and downloaded child porn again. Like, so there's guys like that. I mean, you have to. So I think to the degree that you're a client listening to this, a lot of the concepts that we talk about, it's going to be coming from that, that dispassion and compassion frame of mind, and it would be a change of pace. I would think for a lot of you guys who are listening, especially if you're not in Utah, because Alpha has a lot of clients in Utah. But if you're not in Utah, this would be an excellent resource. And for should we talk about kind of how this benefits the therapist too?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for our therapists, I mean, any therapist listening to this, I think obviously any discussion or dialogue regarding the type of treatment that we do is always great. Part of the direction that we want to have on this is other therapists coming on to the podcast as guests. And of course, we'll get a YouTube channel, and I'm sure there will be comments on there. And to the degree that we respond to them, I don't know that I really will. I think it'll be a generating discussion all on its own.
We'll see.
Yeah, sure.
Well, obviously, we want to promote discussion. Yeah, so if people are willing to come on and comment, ask questions, because we know realistically we're doing this day in, day out, so it's nothing to us. But we know that's pretty controversial for some people to hear. Like, what show us sex offender compassion? What the hell?
Right.
So we want questions. We want discussion. Yeah, and if it ends up that we don't agree with you, it's not going to be like we're going to attack you.
Oh yeah, no.
We want discussion. If it ends that we don't agree, we just don't agree. That's okay. But
I hope they do agree or disagree at times. I mean, because again, I just don't think it.
If
everybody's like, yeah, you're right, like that's boring. That doesn't. So I think it. But I mean, obviously, it's out of respect, and even within our same field, there's plenty of people who completely disagree with our philosophy on this.
Well, to that point, I mean, this is something I was going to say when we were talking about the sex offenders. But if we're being specific for therapists and what you can maybe glean from this type of like a podcast or whatever we're doing here, it's maybe if I could set the stage a little bit, maybe I could have talked about this in my intro. But I might have been 23 years old. My first internship was at the halfway house, and it was between working at the halfway house in Ogden where we're located, or working at a behavioral unit at the hospital. Those were the only two internships in my hometown. Everything else was in Salt Lake. And so when I looked into the hospital, I saw that it was primarily assessments, no real clinical work. And the halfway house, still I had no real detail, but it was working for a company that contracted as a therapist to work with the halfway house. And so day one, I show up and I enter this facility. First time I've entered any kind of a correctional facility in my life, and it's, as an intern. And my clinical supervisor at the time told me, "Oh, by the way, you're working with sex offenders." Yeah, and like no, it totally, and like it threw me off. And like she goes on to tell me, like this is, it had to have been within 30 seconds of her telling me, by the way, you're working with sex offenders. She told me about how one of the clients recently got removed and sent to prison because he had been caught journaling, because sometimes sex offenders have to journal in different programs. He'd been caught journaling about sodomizing his previous therapist with a cucumber. And so, like, this is day one, within a couple minutes of meeting with this lady.
Immediate horror story.
Immediate horror story.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, like, I had a completely, I was ready to fight. So I'm in my therapy session with these people, I say regular dudes, but I mean, like, just, people that are relatively unassuming. And I'm, like, sitting, like, up in my chair. I'm ready to, like, throw a punch if I need to. I'm making sure that I have an access to the exit and all these different things that have been completely unfounded. So I've been doing this now for, 2005 was my internship, so a little bit. And I've been attacked by, an adult client exactly 0 times. Like working in the group home, Mace and I, we worked at the same, Justin worked there too. We all worked in the same group. Juvenile is a little different, but like with the adults, I've been attacked exactly 0 times.
Well,
I've been sodomized exactly 0 times.
Yeah. Well, the juvenile thing is not even a good, thing to base it off, because that was pretty behavioral. Like,
for sure.
You know what I mean?
For
like,
sure.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with sex offenders. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing, is that any time in a session I've actually felt a little on edge, which has been pretty rare. It had nothing to do with the fact that the guy was a sex offender.
Yeah.
He was struggling pretty bad with mental health stuff. And was
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah.
Well, but there is though, like, you don't do that to, like, new hire, like, so Jeff is
Throw him into the fire.
Well, Jeff is really responsible for a lot of the day-to-day employee interaction. That's kind of one of his roles in the company. He does a lot of the hiring. You can't not prep them a little bit. I mean, what do you say to new therapists who get hired on?
Well, I
say something.
I kind of ask them questions about kind of what their general take is. Like, what do you think about sex offenders? What do you think about working with them? What do you suppose your philosophy is? What's your approach? Blah, blah, blah. Kind of get a feel where they're coming from. And if they have the lock them up, throw away the key approach, oftentimes I'll talk about, I haven't labeled it dispassionate compassion, but I think I will now.
That might be a Mace original.
I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. So, I kind of go down that concept, and we have had people be a little too loose that have, worked with us before as therapists.
Loose ain't a great word for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, loose is the wrong word.
Mature.
Yeah. So I mean, I gauge where they're coming from, but if they're a little too loose, I tighten up the reins. If they're a little too tight, I loosen up a little bit. But a lot of it is through how much we do with our staffing. I think that therapists pick up pretty quick on the methods we use to hold them accountable, them being the clients, and also the methods that we use to, like, establish rapport. So, I mean, again, any therapist listening to this, that the therapeutic alliance is the most important thing for therapeutic change. Study after study has demonstrated that relationship. It doesn't all of a sudden change when you're working with a sex offender. It's not like, now that we're over in this population of, forensic, whatever Mace talked about, those cool words, but as soon as we're working with sex offenders, the rules change, gloves are off, we're throwing punches, we're threatening prison. That's not what works, because, again, it's cliche to say, but these are people too, and they don't respond well to threats or coercion. They respond well to feeling that they have somebody they can trust.
I was just going to throw this in there. Either of you can jump in and answer this, but I'm kind of thinking of like a devil's advocate question of someone that might be listening. Is I would think if you have somebody that has shown a history of deviant sexual activity and they have victims, they've harmed other people and themselves, how is it going to keep the community safer to kind of lighten up on those guys and not hold them like to a strict standard and kind of not necessarily beat them up or shame them, but like to kind of force accountability.
Yeah.
Talk about accountability.
Well, it's a good question. So, like, so this is the thing. So, again, they're from day one. They've been kind of coached that. I mean, anybody. So their lawyer, the person who's their primary advocate from day one, who's usually a public defender, and nothing against public defenders, they just have a huge caseload, right? They tell them not to say anything. Don't talk about anything, right? And then the
Yeah,
people
well,
they do.
Any lawyer, really. Yeah,
Well, yeah, for sure.
don't
And
talk.
that's good legal advice. I'm
Yeah.
not dissing that. And then anybody that they do talk to, a judge, a prosecutor, anybody like that, is going to, rain hell on these dudes, right? So here's the thing. This is what I want to say about this as far as the client goes. And this is important for therapists to understand too. So again, I have to step back from that and allow that guy to talk about this in a way that he feels comfortable. Because if he doesn't, how can I help him? So we have to accept the fact these dudes weren't psychotic when they committed their offenses. We have to accept the fact that they were doing the best they could do with what they had at the time. And I know that's a weird thing, but it's a completely rational decision. Their offense made complete sense to them at the time that they did it. Now that's foreign to us. So and just say that. Say, I don't know how you could have done that. I mean, you don't maybe say it in those words, but I think you kind of take it from that point of view and say, well, let's try to understand. And it's not just any one thing. I mean, yeah, some guys have some deviant sexuality, but it's a lot of things usually. So I try to tell them, like, helping you get some insight into the constellation of events that took place that you were either in control of or not in control of that led to your sexual offense is really important. And if we can't have an open discussion about that, then unfortunately I can't help you. Because unpackaging your decision at that time is really, really important. And that's why. So it's taking a step back from that gives them the opportunity to talk about it in an open and honest manner and not have to worry that if I use the wrong word or if I say the wrong thing, this guy's going to slit my throat in session. This therapist is going to go tell treatment team and I'm going to get thrown out. Because I've seen that. I've seen that when we're in a group therapy session. I remember a guy, he said the wrong thing about something a video that I showed, right? And I was new too, and I was just showing a video, and of course, it's like any video that a therapist shows, they're like, "Oh yeah, point out the thinking errors that they're so stupid," right? Something like that. And he said some really off the wall comments about, this. So it was a movie called. What
was it Tough Guys?
No, I can't remember. No, it was Deliver Us from Evil.
Oh yeah.
And it was about they were highlighting this. No,
Yes,
it was Deliverance. This is
kinda.
Yeah. So it was about this Catholic priest who had sexually abused all these children, and then it was coming to light, and then it kind of went into all that controversy, and I really didn't know the direction I was going. I was like, I'll just show this video, whatnot. And there was this dad, and this dad was like dying, because he's talking about how he's questioning his faith. And his daughter, who's been sexually abused multiple times, so he had this priest move into his house, right? And he said, so he blamed himself and his daughter, because this is what happened. So he told his daughter, if anybody ever touches you like that, you tell me and I'll kill him, right? So this priest is doing this to his daughter, and then his daughter goes to school and asks her little friend, and she's 5, so she's in kindergarten. She asks her friend, hey, what happens if somebody kills somebody else, right? And her friend says, oh, they go to prison forever. So this little girl, poor little girl's like, oh my God, I don't want to tell my dad because then he's going to kill the father and then go to prison forever. And I like my dad. So the dad's dying because he's like, oh, I can't believe I told my daughter that because I could have put a stop to this because she didn't tell me, right? Really.
That's sad.
Yeah, super emotional moment. And this guy's like, oh, get over it. Gee, cry me a river, fucking build a bridge and get over it. Yeah, right in the middle. I mean, it's super, super inappropriate, right? So I talked to treatment team about that. Next day, gone, like immediately, right?
Wow.
Well, the thing is that what he said there, as horrific as you might think that is, and it is.
That's telling a little girl to get over.
That's
a
lot. Well, that's a lot of information where that guy is in treatment.
I was going
right?
to say that's an honest moment, though.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I get it, and this is where it comes down to it. Is as a therapist, I can get mad at that, and I can like jump that dude and throw him in prison. But again, he was vulnerable. He came forward and said something. Now he doesn't know that. It's not like I'm going to show some vulnerability. Like he doesn't. He was showing vulnerability. And again, what would I do? I would point out to him. I mean, how different would that have been if I were to say, you know what, I appreciate that you were able to be vulnerable in that moment and honestly say how you were feeling, and then have a dialogue with and help him understand why the way he said it was horrible to think that way and how that's not. And again, how that's not going to help him be successful thinking that way. How that's going to be a continuation of him being in the criminal justice system.
How that's not going to help him be successful.
Correct.
Right.
It's always so again. And then that's not so again, anybody who realizes that, like, well, yeah, that's not great for me to think that way. I need to get away from that. Now, there's that's session after session. after session to get him there.
He could have said that for any variety of reasons. It might not necessarily have even been a reflection of his true beliefs. It might have hit close to home. His defensive walls might have gone up, and he said some crazy shit to kind of cope with the feelings of feeling like crap. Like, who knows? But like without being able to dialogue with these guys, you know, and like you said, you reported it to treatment team, and the next day the guy was gone. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
it's a missed opportunity for him. It's a missed opportunity for us. I'm not talking crap on you. It's just one of those things that like it's one of those things where a statement that internally gets our ire up, gets us internally reactive. We then lash out. What kind of role model are we trying to provide? You know, as therapists, we're supposed to, again, if we're being dispassionate, we need to recognize, all right, what this client said got under my skin. But then, you know what? Set that aside. Grow up. You got into this profession to deal with some crazy stuff. It's not your job to be reactive.
Well, and so to Justin's question, the other piece about that is, I mean, so that's one element of risk, is making comments that are supportive of sexual offending. That's one element of risk. So when we do, and this is why, and we'll talk about this later on too, that's why I love that we do risk assessment, because saying some crazy shit in a group therapy session, I mean, and if it continued that way, if I challenged the dude and tried to help him with it, and if 3 months later he wasn't changing his opinion, well, yeah, that's going to raise his risk in one category,
one area
of 16 different categories, right? So again, that's not, I don't think on its face, a reason to boot a dude from treatment. So I think that the idea of stepping back is again, I'm going to, as horrific as these dudes are, I got to have some thick skin about that and set aside my personal feelings about this at times, because it can be really hard. You know, it can be really hard to kind of talk about that. So as a therapist, one of the things that we're going to talk about in this too is the curriculum of, well, not our curriculum, but I think on a episode basis, we're going to be talking about a concept as far as therapy goes, like this sex offender therapy specifically. And maybe even give you some. So Jeff and I are currently in production of a group therapy manual that we implement right now in the program, that has different topics each week that target all these different risk areas. And so as a therapist, I think if you're talking about whatever it is, you know, so again, this would be empathy, right? Great, empathy is a really particular nuanced subject that needs to be discussed, and how it applies to sex offenders. Well, if I'm a therapist, I can say, well, yeah, if they had more empathy, they wouldn't reoffend or something. But man, that's so complex. It's not that simple. And so as a therapist listening to this, I think getting some perspective for that would be very helpful, because I wouldn't know how to approach it if I was a new therapist. You know, and I say, man, you should have more empathy. What does that even mean?
And I would. This is totally a guess based on my experience coming up on 3 years with alphas. If I'm trying to teach somebody about empathy, and they feel like, even if it's not true, but like they feel like going through the system and everything, they haven't been shown an ounce of empathy, they will not care at all.
Spot on,
and that will fall on deaf ears. So if I open that door by starting to give a crap how they feel and what's going on, and then I talk about empathy, yeah, they may be a little like more open to the idea of like, other people feel things too, you know, and which I think we're again talking about, in my opinion, a pretty small amount of sex offenders. I'm not saying sex offenders have zero empathy, but I'm just saying if we're gonna teach empathy, I've got to it's kind of, I got to model it first.
Right.
I got to show I actually care about the fact you spent X amount of years in prison, and you haven't seen your family, and you can't find a place to live. If I'm saying screw you to all that, focus on everybody else. Well, what's that guy taking out of that conversation?
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's, I think that's going to be like a 3-hour-long podcast.
I know. That's like a whole topic.
Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it's a good one. But again, as a therapist, I would be interested on how to present that. And again, I don't think our methods are perfect. I would say though that the way that we frame it, at least for the clients, in my opinion, is super effective, because and it might be anecdotal. But then again, I mean, I think we have stats and numbers to show what we do too. That'll be a later guest too.
Well, I mean, a large part of what we do is anecdotal. I mean, but this podcast, I mean, ideally, we're reaching out to other therapists, members of the community, people like that. Getting a dialogue going could expand the potential for research, so it's no longer anecdotal; it's statistically based. And again, we'll talk about the approaches we're taking in that realm as well. We're trying to put numbers to what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, even with the we recently went out to the University of Cincinnati, and did a training with Sarah Botner. Oh, God
Bless
her.
your heart, Sarah.
Sarah, if you're listening to this, you are one of my favorite people on this planet. She went. How long was that training?
For
Too
her,
long.
probably 5 months.
Yeah.
It felt about, which was 4 days, but
She did an awesome job, and we were
tolerating
idiots.
us.
We're
What was it?
assholes.
4 days?
Yeah, 4
Yeah.
days.
4 days. Well, okay. Think about it though.
That bad.
No,
It was pretty bad.
I think I don't think it was that. I think Sarah. I'm not speaking for Sarah. My impression was she liked us, but she also had a job to do, which was she was
be
doing a training
professional.
for I think there was 4 other people in the room with Alpha,
Yeah.
and we were goofing around, but like we knew a lot of the stuff we were talking about. It's not as if we didn't learn. I think we just kind of made it. We tried to.
Awesome curriculum.
Yeah, we tried to make it entertaining.
Dude, even Ryan had a hard time with us at points, I think. So.
one
Which
of
is
our
one of the other
fellow
therapists,
therapists.
Yeah. What did he say something
No,
about
I
that?
just, well, he had to sit
dude,
next to me.
you could see it on his face, man.
I didn't look
He's
at
a
him
little
once.
spent.
I didn't look at him once.
Yeah, well, better that way.
Poor guy.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Ryan.
No, but we did, and all of our treatment is based on cognitive behavioral therapy anyway. So the curriculum is great, and implementation of that I think too is again the concepts therein. If I didn't know about what I was doing, then I would really need to kind of understand what was going on there. So as a therapist, I think that would be kind of useful at that point.
Sure.
And then last, I guess, is as a community, right? So what if I'm a citizen listening to this, right? Like, where does value come in for that as a citizen?
As a citizen, I guess hearing the perspective of people that work intimately with these folks, knowing our intention, knowing where we're coming from on a personal level, which I think has kind of been what this introductory Guerrilla Social Work podcast has been about. But also, I don't know, hopefully it provides you with a peace of mind that we're not just flying by the seat of our pants. I think as you come to listen to our podcast, you'll see that we have a pretty cutting edge, continually in development, to the best we can based on statistics and actuarial risk assessments and all these different things that really try to do the best that we can. The thing is, the three of us, and I can probably speak for the rest of Alpha as well, we're passionate about the work that we do. We like it, and for those of you that are clients, we like working with you. We like trying to help you. For members of the community, we like helping these guys help themselves so that they are safe in your neighborhoods, and so that you can get some modicum of relief rather than just logging onto the sex offender registry and spotting out a house that's within a block of yours. That's right now, as a member of the community, that's about all you have in terms of peace of mind, is knowing roundabout where these people live. Well, how about knowing what we're doing with them? That's what I hope we can provide for you guys, and some measure of confidence that the people that we're working with are in good hands to the utmost of our capabilities, and that we're continually trying to improve.
So in other words, as a citizen, like if I'm listening to this as a community member, and I think this is added to it, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm listening to this, attention's going to be paid as to why this matters to me in terms of like why this makes my community safer.
Right?
Why,
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a huge mystery. I don't
Yeah.
think, again, I'm not big into walking around with a pen and a pad asking random people in the community what they think about sex offender treatment, but I bet you most people don't really know.
Well, we know what
we
this
do.
stereotype is, right? We just know.
We know the stereotype of sex offenders,
Yeah.
but do people even have an idea of what treatment involves?
I highly doubt it.
Oh, like people ask me, like, well, what do you do? And I'll give them a brief rundown. Doesn't seem like they really want to listen.
Again, going back to something that Justin said, and I think this is, again, we'll probably talk about this later in the podcast. If I read the news about the most recent audit of the sex offender program that's currently in Utah State Prison, I don't have much confidence in the sex offender treatment at all, right?
They got torn apart.
Right. So I think part of the reason why you and I even started Alpha, a big reason of that was, and this isn't a dig on previous employers or anything like that, but I felt like the field that we were getting in could be done better, right?
It
It should be done.
We
better.
can do
That's
it better.
the whole point. Is how do we continually assess where we're at, what we're doing, and how do we improve in the interest of helping the community, helping our clients.
Yeah.
If we just get stuck in, dark ages therapy, and I'm not going to point anybody out, but like we got to recognize at a certain point if we're going to look at research, if we're going to do anything, which for one you're supposed to be doing, why are we not improving programs? Why are we not changing programs? Why are we not doing things differently based on what research we've seen? To me, that's just a disservice to the field and to, most importantly, clients.
Yeah, you asked an important question. You asked, how do we improve? And then you referenced the dark ages of therapy. Here's the deal. Like, once upon a time, the dark ages of therapy was contemporary therapy. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is you get settled into routine, as is the case with human nature, and pretty soon you end up doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then, the field passes you by, and then what was once contemporary is now the dark ages you've even passed by. So when we're talking about can we do it better, we're saying we can, but that's because we're paying attention. We're paying attention.
We're open to that too. Like there definitely been things that Mace has brought up or Jeff has brought up, and you guys have talked about that has challenged kind of things that I would have been like, no, that's not going to work. But if I'm just stuck in the mentality of I can't ever change my mind, I can't ever learn anything new, like where's that going to get me?
Yeah.
So it's kind of looking at, okay, somebody has actually researched this and that works better. Like isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, yeah. I was listening to I listened to a book, an audio book called Mindset, and it was basically just going over the idea. There's two basic mindsets. You have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, and a growth mindset is open to that, right? I mean, I can be prejudiced against this new research and say, man, I don't know. I've been doing this, and it kind of seems like it feels good, but again, I think, and research, I don't know, I always worry about it because it can be, like data can be skewed too, I mean, like that, whatever, but I'm saying that the one thing is for us, I mean, it's like we got into conferences and how, I mean, it's been over a decade now that everybody's saying, do the good lives model, do the good lives model, do the good, right? And some programs are barely getting around to doing it.
10 years later.
Yeah, like it's crazy. I mean, like, and again, that to me is nuts, and
10 years turnaround on contemporary.
And there's still antiquated approaches to this, which again, I think if you have the viewpoint that this is what you do and this is better, well, awesome. Let's talk about that. Like, let's talk about, because I'm not gonna. It's not like I'm willing to be open to talking about it and going through that. And of course, a robust debate is always welcome. Those are good things to talk about. I'm glad you can say that, because even some of I don't want to be looked at as a guru. I mean, ever by any stretch. I mean, our client, as new therapists, I come to, hey, Mace or Jeff, what do you think about this? And that's why lately, as that you've been answering some of the questions has been really refreshing, because I hate to be. You being Justin. Yeah, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah.
The lately Justin's been answering
yet,
questions is really refreshing, because I don't think that any one person is going to be the sole source. I think collectively, I like how we discuss and things go. I mean, there are some things that we know that from experience that, man, you got to go in this direction, and those are very particular. But otherwise, I think I like the discussion. I'm not okay with the guru label either, and like Mace, you'll know what I'm talking about. And Justin, I think I probably said this to you too, but there's actually this was Mike Hanley. Love that guy. It's a big name in the field here in Utah in sex offender therapy. He's a stud, and we're lucky enough to have him work for us. But he told me when I was he was my second clinical supervisor. The first clinical supervisor was the one that scared me about the cucumber sodomization story, right? The next one was Mike, and Mike he kind of brought me along and told me that there's a problem with people when they get their L being their license, when they're no longer an intern, they're no longer under supervision, but once they have done so many hours and taken this test or that test, again, the very test that Mace gave me crap about at the outset of this podcast, that once people become licensed, they become complacent, and they no longer worry about educating themselves and furthering themselves, and that's the worst mentality to have, and I think I want that to be the exact mindset that we have at Alpha. And Mace and myself we kind of have a little bit ahead of the game in terms of clinical direction at Alpha, but neither of us are above staffing our own cases and trying to get feedback. And you know what? If I staff a case and I say, hey, here's what's happening with my client, this is the direction I want to go, but
other therapists that maybe have less experience than me, but maybe collectively through a unified voice, want to go a different direction. You know what? I'm going to go with that direction because I'm not a guru. I'm not above it.
That's kind of what's funny too. Is I don't have my L, so I'm a CSW right now. So I'm coming up on maybe 10 months left before I even get my L. And I've even noticed myself kind of falling into a groove of like, oh, I kind of know how it works. But I've definitely liked when questions come up with treatment team. Sometimes it just gives me especially somebody new to the field that's asking a lot of questions. Sometimes it does highlight something that I've even kind of like, maybe that isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
So sometimes someone that has like a fresh set of eyes is the best person to ask a question. Sometimes you can get so used to it that you just think you know what it is.
Well, plus,
sure,
if you're going on one way, you get convinced of another, dude. Like you should be biased for your client. I mean, you worked with that dude for a year or more. You should be biased with that guy. And because you have a therapeutic relationship, and that therapeutic relationship, unfortunately, clouds our objective judgment, and sometimes we need an outside opinion looking in.
Down to a coin flip.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how good clinical judgment is, listeners.
Yeah.
It's a coin flip.
Well, and that's why we staff it, but we use risk assessment, all that jazz too. So I think ultimately, yeah, those things are. But as a therapist, dude, if I was a therapist and I'd done the same thing for like 15 years, that'd be scary to be like, hey, we're gonna do this new thing, by the way. That'd be scary. I mean, let's admit that.
Yeah.
That'd be terrifying, right? So like even Mike, who's been doing Mike Hanley, who's been doing 27 years, right?
Years, yeah.
The other job I share with him, we were recently trained in a new program, and again, I think that he's a good example of being open to something like that. And it's not without question. Of course you're going to say, well, wait a minute. Here's something that I've been doing for a long time, and I'm going to throw that out there. But I'm willing to be convinced. And Mike's always been that way. He's a really good – I've learned a lot from that guy as far as the field goes and going in that direction. And I'm grateful for that because growing up under him and you has helped me to the point where I'm saying, oh, yeah, I can be open to new ideas. Why not? Who cares about those things and go in that direction? So I think that we're going to try to stay on the cutting edge of treatment and topics that are coming out of this. Part of what we go over with our different topics, and it is kind of based on our curriculum. I think as a client, as I'm listening, I'm going to hear, this is why it's going to be important for you. This is how it's going to help you no longer be involved in the criminal justice system. Again, it's not just about not reoffending. I don't want to get involved in the criminal justice system anymore. We'll talk about statistics later on, but again, most of our guys go back on violations, not new reoffenses. So
for sure.
If we're only talking about sexual reoffenses, we're missing most of it. So I just don't want them involved in the criminal justice. And the only way to accomplish that is to lead a good life and stop committing crimes, right?
Absolutely.
As a therapist, I might get a new spin on treatment. Treatment as usual. This would be something very different unless you're with Alpha, and even if you are with Alpha, we'll probably force you to listen to this. But or
bunch of lackeys.
Yeah, or I mean, like I'll get this might be some stuff that I have thought about, and maybe I'm in stage of change, like pre-contemplation of whether or not I'm going to start making changes to my own program. And this might be a turning point for you or a source of, like, oh, man, I hate those guys. Either way, I hope you listen. And then as a community member, this would be, I think, maybe help me, educate me a little bit more on some of the things that I might not understand about this field or this type of population. And I'm not going to say you should all of a sudden start donating to some sex offender charity by any stretch. What I am saying, though, is the more educated you are, the better you are to deal with them when they're in the community as well. That's to make your community safer, not to treat them with kid gloves by any stretch. So I think overall that's the point of the podcast. Yeah,
for sure. That's probably a good first rundown.
Yeah,
guerrilla social work.
Yeah, I would look at. I mean, anyone that's listening, you made it this far in. If you can tolerate us at this point, so it would be saying we're in the middle of setting up our social media stuff. So we have our Facebook page. So just Guerrilla Social Work, which is obviously not the animal. Guerrilla Social Work on Facebook, and then we're setting up like a Twitter and on Instagram.
GUERRILLA.
Yeah, 2 R's, 2 L's.
Let's hope I spelled it right.
Yeah.
So feel free to post, ask questions. I mean, we're open to anything. I mean, no one's going to be judged. No one's going to be critiqued on their
judge.
We won't publicly judge you. Before the podcast is on, we're going to judge you a lot. Probably. No, but we welcome questions, any kind of feedback, anything like that, and. And just the whole point of this podcast, as you probably picked up so far, is just giving you kind of another side to the how we view, working with this population. I mean, I can tell you right now, being into this, I've shed my own tears and frustrations and working with clients and having things happen. And I know that's a big part of the background thing is our clients will sometimes feel like, maybe it's a money-making scheme or maybe these guys are part of the system. And I can tell you right now, I've personally seen people crying. I've cried over certain things and shed some tears and been involved. And it impacts us. And I think that's because we do care. And that's a big part of this. And, we want ultimately what's best for our clients. We want to.
I can't identify with. I've never cried in my life.
I've cried enough to make up for you not crying.
I've cried somewhere in the middle.
So it balances out. Yeah.
So our next podcast, we're going to be talking about motivation for treatment. What motivates these guys, how to motivate these dudes, and why it matters. So I guess we hope you tune in, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Alrighty, that does it for the first episode of the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. We want to thank you for tuning in. Like I said earlier, if you happen to have any questions or comments or anything that you want to know, look us up on the different social media outlets. Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, GUERRILLA. And we would love to take any questions or any comments that you may have. And so for the next episode, tune in on that. We're going to be talking specifically about motivation and treatment, how to get clients to engage in the treatment process, to trust the treatment process, and be more motivated in their own treatment. So we will go over that in the next episode. See you later.